Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, I am so pleased to help you today to deal with this incredible pandemic that we are in, and we don't know how long it's going to be. I have a guest for you who is a renowned author who has written on stress management and how never to give up and how to be healthy and happy in relationships, personally as well as at work. And she's written recently on how to deal with COVID-19 as well as stress in general, which we always need to know. Leslie Charles is an author and a very dear old friend of mine from the National Speakers Association. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. I am pleased to be here.
Wonderful. So tell us, I know what you did, Leslie. You're always so alive and so current and so on the cutting edge. And so you and I figured out how we were going to deal with this pandemic. And I wrote a little bit about it, and you wrote a lot about it. So tell us what you want us to know, what can help.
The first thing I would like to mention, because I did a speech recently to a group of professional women, and we did these little breakout groups on Zoom. And the very first topic that was brought up was, I need a hug.
Yes.
So I would like to start there. In our relationships, we're used to nurturing. We are used to being nurtured. And a hug is a wonderful connection between ourselves and another person. And I ran into a friend recently who I hadn't seen since the whole pandemic started. And he and I are very, very close. And when I saw him, we are 6 feet apart. We were wearing masks, and it was really awkward. And I think a lot of us are experiencing that right now. What do I do? How do I say hello? We can't hug anymore. And we stood there, and honestly, it felt like I was running into an ex.
Yeah.
So awkward. So on my walk the next day, I thought about when I saw Billy and, what can you do? So I have come up with a COVID hug. Let's call it a COVID hug. And as our listeners are hearing you and I exchange this wonderful conversation about a not so wonderful topic, here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to take your right hand and put it on your left shoulder. I would like you to take your left hand and put it on your right shoulder. And here's a little gist of what you can say. I love you, and what I really want to do is hug you right now, but I can't. So I'm hugging myself, and if you do the same thing, it will be the equivalent of each of us hugging. And what we know is that when you give a hug, you get one. And I don't know about you, but it feels really good just to have that pressure on my shoulders for a moment. And if you really need some extra nurturing, drag your hands down below your elbows to your wrists. That's called hovering. And that also helps you feel like you were just given some nurturing. So I think that's a good place to start.
That is brilliant. What I do is I make the hug gesture and I kind of wiggle my upper body a little bit. But I love the way you're putting this. This is wonderful. And I thought you were going to talk about self-touch also. We live in a society that is very suspicious of touch, and all the general need for human touch has been siphoned off into this one slice of pie called sexual touch. so that when anyone is touched, there's this sexual component, which is completely not necessary. So the concept of self-touching is a hard one to get across. Now, it's interesting. My training is that touching yourself down to your wrists and your hands and your face is called havening, but you know it as hovering. That's very interesting. I never heard the term hovering for that, but I have some training in havening, which is just exactly what you're saying, Leslie. The hugging and stroking with strong, steady stroke, mostly up to your elbows, and then moving into your hands, and then moving into your face and your forehead.
Wow.
And I would like everyone to do, well, not if you're driving, okay, but to remember, people, that it is so important to touch yourself and hug yourself. So what say you, Leslie?
Well, I love the word havening. I had made up hovering, and havening is so much better because I'm not a psychologist. I depend on people like you to educate me.
Oh, okay.
And let's talk for a moment about comfort zones, because what you mentioned about this whole idea of self-nurturing, especially with touch, self-touch, it's an uncomfortable topic. A lot of us have not been raised that way. It's questionable. It's embarrassing. And I would like to suggest that we are so far out of our comfort zones right now.
Yes.
We may as well push the envelope and learn new things. We've had hugs taken away from us. And now, as you said, we can haven. We can help ourselves have that sense of love. And we all really need to learn more self-love anyway, especially as females. We're so hard on ourselves. And this is the way to do it. Havening. I love it.
Self-touch, self-hug. And I'm struck by that you came up with this on your own, how similar it is to the word havening.
Yes, yes.
And now you're going to Google it, as is everyone listening, and you will get such a plethora of information about havening and all of the body-mind connection and how it changes the brain waves and how it helps de-stress. It's right up your alley, Leslie.
Wow, I can't
That's wonderful. You're gonna absolutely love it.
Well, one of the natural things I've done, I haven't been able to do it since the beginning of lockdown. My mom is in a nursing home. She's 100 years old now.
Yes.
And when I would leave her, especially if she was getting ready to take a nap, I would put my hands on her face. Her skin is still so soft.
Yes, yes.
And I miss being able to do that, and I never thought about doing that to myself.
Right.
Or for myself. Let me change that. For myself. And that might be a good distinction for our listeners to use the word for rather than to.
I think it's a wonderful distinction, and I think this is the time to start having a candid conversation about self-touch, because we have been prohibited from touching our genitals culturally. And the idea of touching oneself, I remember reading about Jean Harlow, that in her photographs, she was like a silent screen actor, and that so many of her photographs, she was holding herself, touching her shoulders, and she was labeled a narcissist because she did that. So that was, when I read that, it was like, this was decades ago, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to be a narcissist. I don't want to touch myself. Isn't that something?
Well, and where I'm going with that also is, wow, what a pioneer she was.
Yes.
And also, it's maybe we need some language change. I love language. I love words. And think about the whole process. That this is a brave conversation, by the way, that we're starting out with.
Yes.
And the whole process of self-appreciation
Yeah.
that might be a good way to approach this idea of hugging ourselves, of havening, of being able to become, well, what's the phrase? Comfortable in our own skin.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Comfortable, literally. And instead of figuratively only, literally comfortable in your own skin. Yeah, so I know for me, when we were first in lockdown, I did my usual, reframing and, by the way, the difference, I just want to put in a plug for positive psychology, because the culture tells us that we're supposed to have positive thinking, which is not the same as positive framing. Positive thinking is where you can't have a negative thought, can't have a bad thought. No, 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 everything is wonderful. Whereas positive framing is taking into account everything, all the yays and nays, looking at the whole big picture and deciding the next best proaction for yourself. Given this, as they say in Zen Buddhism, given this is as it is, how do I proceed? So I said I was going to do a positive framing and say, I am putting myself on retreat. I am putting myself on retreat. That was the first decision I made. The second decision I made is I was going to clean out all of my closets and all of my file drawers. Oh, because I had so much more time now. Well, I did that for about 1 week. And then I realized that this is a much bigger problem that we have, and that we all have been in the midst of a cultural grief, a general grief for all of us. And then I started writing to my circle, my clients, my students, about being more gentle with ourselves and looking to appreciate, of course, what we do have. Because when we look at the nature of grief, it's about what do we have? What have we lost? Number one, the question, what have we lost? Number two, what do we have? And number three, what do we want? So anyway, I'm just telling you my evolution in these last few months. So tell me, you have so many wonderful thoughts about all this.
I'm smiling as I'm listening to you because, oh my gosh, we've traveled the same path.
Yes.
When this all started, I decided I was cultivating solitude.
Right.
That was my reframing.
Right.
Lockdown. I am cultivating my solitude, which has been really nice, and I'm still up for it. And I've avoided going to a lot of places because there are too many people, or I'm not ready for some of the exposure that I might have. So I'm pretty self-protective. Yeah. And if the lockdown is ended for my mom, I want to be healthy enough that I could go visit her immediately. You mentioned cleaning closets, was it?
Yes, and okay. File drawers, coloring files.
I wrote a book on grief and loss. It's called All Is Not Lost. And in that book, after my son's accidental work death, I discovered that mindless tasks are very helpful when we are in a state of grief, because it gives us a sense that we have some control over some area of our life, and because everything else is totally out of control. So I sat down a couple of months after we were told to stay home, and I thought about grief and this global crisis, and I came up with 4 things that we have lost. One is our sense of security, even though it's kind of made up in some ways. Yes. You leave the house, you don't know what's going to happen to you that day. And routine. We lost our routine, which is a huge part of our day.
Huge.
All of a sudden, the kids are home. Some people have no job. They've been furloughed. Others are working at home. And even
So,
when I've seen a few newscasts, I love hearing someone's dog barking in their home.
yeah, yes.
It's been really fun, being inside celebrities' homes.
Yes. So, Leslie, before you go on to 3 and 4, I just want everyone to know who you are. Leslie Charles, author of many, many books, renowned seminar leader and professional speaker. Leslie, spelled as it sounds, Leslie, Charles, the name, CHARLES.com. And we can find all of the books you're mentioning on your website.
You can.
Good, good. And I want everyone also to know, in case you just tuned in, we are WHPC, Just Relationships, and I am Dr. Duffy Spencer. Very happy to be your host and interviewing my long-term friend, Leslie Charles. So thank you so much, Leslie. So routine, yeah, the comforting of the dog. Hearing a dog bark in the background, I love it. And of course, we all love seeing how people live, what their house looks like, and all of that. Yes. So yes. So go on. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh no, that was perfect. So we've lost security, a sense of security. We've lost our routine. We have a whole new routine that we're trying to develop. The panic shopping that went on early on was quite sort of emotionally devastating. I remind myself every now and then, I'm not good at this. And it's okay not to be good at it because we've never gone through this before. It's brand new.
Right.
So the other two things that we've lost is our sense of independence, having to think, do I really want to go to this place, and this place today? Is it necessary? Sometimes I want a fancy recipe. I love to cook. And I think, no, I've got this stuff in my fridge. I don't need to go anywhere today, so I don't. And then the first thing we started talking about that we've lost is our sense of connection.
Yes.
So, and the physical connection, and that's where technology comes in. I have Zoom dates with a lot of my friends now, regular scheduled Zoom dates and FaceTime, so that I can connect with the people I love.
Right. That's and I have come kicking and screaming into technology, and all of my counseling clients are Zoom or phone, and I have gotten used to giving therapy on Zoom. I thought I would never get used to it, but I have. And as much as I really dislike technology, I recognize it's our saving grace. Can you imagine if we were all isolated? We couldn't talk to each other. We couldn't see each other. I mean, I couldn't imagine a worse hell than that.
And this is a good time for us to write notes to people. I mean, phone calls are fine, but a note, someone can hang on to it and read it.
Yes.
And read it. And being able, Zoom, I was intimidated by it. I always get nervous because I'm not very left-brained either. And I always get nervous when people say, oh, it's so simple.
I know, I hate that. Why do people say it's so simple? It's simple to you.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And I immediately get intimidated when they tell me. And then I beat myself up because it's not simple for me.
Right.
Yeah. So and the hardest part for me was scheduling properly.
Oh, yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, my word.
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
The presenting is easy.
I know.
I've done that for years, but the steps required, that's the hard part.
That is the hard part. And I have to say that, well, I'm very blessed to live with my husband, who's very affectionate, and I'm very, very blessed to be with my sweetie in lockdown. And the families are blessed as well. But of course, we know there's also a lot of conflict and a lot of things that are, brewing. When I have couples that I counsel, I always tell them, you're fighting about the same thing for 20 years. The details have changed, right? But it's the roots of it. And now the roots are showing. Our roots are showing on our hair, and our roots are showing in our relationships, because now so much is intensified, and it's very, very hard for people. So let me just add to what you're saying, because along with connection must come boundaries.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, if you don't have boundaries, you cannot have clear connection. And people, there are many people who do not live in homes where there is adequate space for physical boundaries. We live in a colonial, so we each take a floor usually during the day, and then we get together in the evening. And but the physical boundary and the psychological boundary, because just ordinary things like excuse me. If we're in someone's psychic space, excuse me, may I have a word, or do you have a minute later, or now, or tell me. Because we're in each other's physical space, we forget about psychic boundaries, which, again, I say comes tantamount with connection. What do you think?
I love that. When I did a consultation, a year-long consultation with a work group, they told me they were an interruption culture. And when we're close physically and mentally with someone, we tend to think we have free range to interrupt them. And I had heard a story about a woman's daughter who had learned in Montessori school to say, well, one day she said to her mother, "Are you available?"
What?
And the mom had never heard anything like that coming out of her
that
mother.
Is so funny.
So she started using it. She and her husband started using it with each other. And I taught this to the group. And it was like the whole flavor of the room changed. And that was one of the things they most appreciated. And "are you available" doesn't mean then you go ahead and interrupt. You wait for the answer.
Right. Did you say 4-year-old? Did I hear you say 4-year-old?
Oh! Yeah, she learned it in Montessori school.
Oh, I love Montessori. Okay, that is absolutely brilliant. I remember when I did a talk show in Chicago, Patrice Berry, I don't know where she is these days. She was also a member of the National Speakers Association. And the topic they invited me, and they flew me in to Chicago for, was Red Hot Mamas, sexy women over 50. And so we had a panel. And when we were all sitting together in the green room, the producer comes in and says, "I want you all to interrupt each other. I want you to interrupt each other." Leslie, it was so hard for me. It went against all of my training and all of my values to do something like that. Yet I will say that, and that's a whole other topic, that men tend to interrupt a lot more than women do. So, there's a lot of literature on that. And it's very, very, very interesting. Pat Heim, Heim, has done a lot of wonderful research on men and women in the workplace and the different cultures, the hierarchical male culture and the flat female culture. And we take turns, Leslie. Women take turns. Men interrupt.
That's
so.
True.
Yeah. So whatever our learning has been, Gloria Steinem said, the main challenge in life is not to learn, but to relearn.
And I would add, I just wrote a piece for a client: learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And
it's
by the way,
very hard to unlearn. Yes.
Deborah Tannen, a name from the past, has written something lately. I saw her name, and I need to find out if it's another book that she's written. And again, the same sort of male-female speak, we could call it.
Right. Let me know if you, I'll look it up myself, but I love her. She's, my goodness, what a trailblazer.
Right.
So we have just a couple of minutes left, and I want to tell everyone I'm so pleased that Leslie will be back with us next week. So it will be a 2-part series. And so is there anything else you want to say to end part 1 of Leslie Charles's views on COVID-19?
One of the things that I keep reminding myself, and I did it on my walk this morning, is that we don't have control over what's happening out there. And I like to remind myself in this whole idea, let's go back to reframing for a moment, that this is one day of my life, regardless of what's going on out there. And I refuse to allow the circumstances I can't control to ruin my day.
I love how you put that. Refuse to allow. Refuse to allow. And so many of us, and I work with my patients around the idea of what part in you is not allowing you to do this, not allowing you to experience joy. I have some people who are recently widowed, and they feel guilty if they have joy because they should only have grief. All the shoulds, right, around feelings. All the shoulds. So, and of course, the Serenity Prayer, which Reinhold Niebuhr wrote almost 100 years ago, but that the AA has adopted. And so if people think that's just for druggies, that's just for AA members, the serenity to accept what you cannot change, the courage to change what you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, it is the thumbprint for all of stress management. Yeah.
I'm nodding as you say that.
Yes, I know you are.
True. Absolutely true. And it's hard sometimes to understand that we constantly have choices. And that's where self-awareness comes in.
Yes.
It's our self-talk and being willing to say, well, what am I resisting about this? This whole idea of when we are in grief, it's hard to laugh. And that's exactly what we need to do.
Yes. And again, to give ourselves permission to do that.
Yes.
So, my dear, the good news is you're coming back next week, and lesliecharles.com to seek not only wonderful books, but speaking engagements and trainings and all the wonderful things that Leslie Charles does. And if you're interested in seeking your own roots and your depth within, just email me at drduffyspencer@gmail, drduffyspencer@gmail, and we'll go from there. And meanwhile, this is WHPC 90.3, Just Relationships, wishing you great relationships.